everyone, and welcome to another edition of Connecting with Kim. Our job here every week is to bring you information about people, places, and things that makes your life in our corner of paradise that much better. And we have a great show for you today. So before we kick it off, I also want to thank my sponsor, the Spring of Tampa Bay, who provides my on-air wardrobe, which can include clothing, jewelry, etc. And you can go to my Facebook and my Instagram pages and find out which items came from the Spring Boutique located at the corner of Swann and Henderson, and then you can go and get them for yourself, because I can't possibly keep and buy single thing that I wear on the show. I wouldn't have enough closet space. So I want you to go and share your business with them, because they provide sanctuary and services to survivors of domestic violence and their children, and they've been doing a great job since 1977, and they deserve your support. They also have a thrift store located at the corner, on North Willow. So please go and give them your business, and I thank them so much. You can catch the audio of our show on Sun Radio 96.3 FM in Sun City Center and on stream. The show airs Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3:30. So I'm so excited because I'm having a first-timer. That's always exciting when we have first-time guests on Connecting with Kim. And also, I've never had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman before. We've talked on the phone, we've traded emails, but this is like a great thing to meet someone in person and then find out all about their journey and the subject that we're here to talk about today. So my guest in the chair, without further ado, is Mr. Kenny Coogan. Welcome to Connecting with Kim.
Thank you, Kim. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. So Kenny, for those of you who may not know him, is an author, number one, and we have his book here for you on the set to look at. He has a master's in global sustainability, and he is absolutely passionate about Florida wildlife and plants, particularly the focus of this show today, which is going to be carnivorous plants. I know, you just can't wait. But Kenny, as I like every one of my guests on Connecting with Kim at the top of the show, I like them to take a few minutes, you can take as long as you want, to talk about your life journey and what brought us to have this conversation here together today. So take it away.
When I was a senior in high school, the hall monitor, the person who yells at people for running in the hall, he came and gave a guest presentation to the AP biology class, and I was about carnivorous plants, and I was probably one of the only few students that was really interested in that, and I expressed my interest after his talk. And then the next day in the hall, he gifted me a carnivorous sundew and a Venus flytrap.
Oh.
So then I was
You were hooked
from there on out. I probably killed them within 3 or 4 weeks, but I was excited that he shared that passion with me. And then when I went to college, I was studying biology and animal behavior, and I found other people who were also interested in carnivorous plants, and I said, I know exactly who to reconnect with. So then I went back to him. We went over to his house. He taught us how to hybridize daylilies and how to propagate plants. And then, of course, we saw his beautiful carnivorous plant collection, and this is in Buffalo, New York.
Well, just getting ready to ask, where was this, because you're not from Florida.
No, so we learned that you can grow carnivorous plants in Buffalo, New York, and then I started the Western New York Carnivorous Plant Society, and then about 11 years ago I moved to Florida. I started really growing carnivorous plants, and Florida has the most out of all of the states. So in the book I read about 34 different species, 32 of them you can still find here today, and that's many more than the other states. And I enjoy growing them outside, inside, and you can grow them in greenhouses. And I am pretty much a lifelong vegetarian, but I grow carnivorous plants.
And you were also a teacher for a while when you came to Florida.
Yes, I also taught life science, biology, and agriculture, so we had carnivorous plants in there. And a parent bought the students this little vacuum gun that you can suck up bugs with. So teachers would always be calling our classroom and saying, oh, can you please send so-and-so to my classroom? We have a spider, we have a loose fly, and then they would capture it. And this little toy had a magnifying lens on one end so the kids could look up the insect, but then we would release it into the carnivorous plant tank, and then they would watch the carnivorous plants do their job.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So you're in Buffalo, New York, where you're from, right? And you're you've got this life-altering experience, because whenever you have something like that, that's life-altering. You've totally changed direction, or whatever you thought the direction of your life was going to be, and you've caught the bug. No pun intended. Of everyone in these studios laughing at me and going, "Oh, there she goes." You've caught the bug, and now you've got this lifelong passion now for carnivorous plants, and so where do we start? Because you talked about how easy it is to grow in Florida, the number of species. So let's kind of. I always like to level set and then build up from there, for our watchers and our listeners of the subject that we're talking about. So let's kind of start at the basics.
So there's over 1,000 species of plants that eat small little animals and organisms. And pretty much everybody knows the Venus flytrap. And when I do presentations and lectures, I ask, an audience of 30 or 40 people, who can name a carnivorous plant? And we usually get Venus flytrap. And then if we're in Florida, they might say a pitcher plant. And then I say, okay, we got 998 more to go. And people just don't understand that there's a lot of plants that eat bugs.
But is that worldwide, or just in the States, or what what is that? What's the geographic area we're talking about?
They are found everywhere. Except for Antarctica.
Except Antarctica, okay.
I went to Iceland and I went to Alaska, and the roads are covered with carnivorous plants.
Oh, wow. Okay, so now we have all these species of carnivorous plants, and some people could name 2. I didn't even know about the pitcher plant, to be honest with you. But I could have named the Venus flytrap. Okay, so now what's next after we have all these carnivorous plants? I mean, because nature, has introduced them for a reason. I mean, they're in nature for a reason, right?
So one of the most interesting things that I find is their evolution. They've evolved at least 8 different times, 8 different geological times at different places. So there's a carnivorous plant in Australia that it's a pitcher plant that looks artificially like ours, but it's more related to a starfruit tree than it is to our pitcher plant.
Okay.
And then we have a sticky sundew, which is on the cover of my book, and that's more closely related to a Venus flytrap that's snap shut compared to another sticky carnivorous plant. So all of these carnivorous plants have a few things in common. One is that they lure and attract their prey, and 0 of them use flowers to attract their prey, or to eat their prey. So all of them are using modified leaves. So some of them are sticky, some of them snap shut, some of them have little vacuums where they open up a trapdoor inward, and then a big gust of, or not a gust, but a big gulp of water, and the little organism, like a little mosquito larvae, will get swept in there. And then others use a lobster pot trap, where they have a small opening that goes into like a big cavern, and then once the organism's in there, they get lost and they can't figure out how to
get back out, right? Well, kind of like a maze, right? Yeah. But it's kind of like something closes and they can't get out, right?
Yeah. And then the third thing is to classify what a carnivorous plant is. That has to be how they digest their food. So they can use their own enzymes, or they can use the help of bacteria. So we have bacteria in our gut that helps us digest, and carnivorous plants can employ that as well.
I see. I mean, until you came here today to be with me, I would have had no idea about this, about the sheer variety, where they exist. I would have thought they were only in the tropics. Yes. So let's talk about. So now we know different ways, the varieties, the different ways they lure, and the different ways they consume their prey. So let's talk about the kind of prey, because with all those variety of species, they must attract different prey.
Yeah, so probably in the mid-1900s, there's been many, many videos and films about carnivorous plants, man-eating plants. I saw a couple of old-fashioned lithographs, old drawings of like this man-eater from Madagascar, and it kind of looks like a sundew, so it's like this tentacle plant with humans ensnarled in it. And unfortunately, there's no carnivorous plant that's large enough to eat a human.
Well, that might be a relief to some people, right? Because we have all these problems in Florida in the Everglades with the pythons and so on. I think probably people because there's always something want to eat you or sting you in Florida. So that's probably a good thing for them to know.
So the over 30 species that are in Florida, what are they eating? They're mostly eating protozoas, amoebas, spiders, beetles, moths, bees, ants, tiny small organisms. In some Southeast Asian countries, there's a couple of nepenthes, which are a type of pitcher plant that can get very large, and they can eat 1 to 3 mice a year. But that's usually about as big as their prey.
Well, you should know that Kenny brought us some plants today, some carnivorous plants into the studio, but we use green screen, and plants tend to be green. So what we did is we shot pictures of the plant, and they're going to be introduced into the final version of this show when it airs. So
speaking of green,
yeah,
the reason why they're green is because they can photosynthesize just like any other plant, except they don't do it as well as non-carnivorous plants. So usually carnivorous plants need more sun than a typical house plant. So if you want to grow it inside your house, you can't just have it, in your dark bedroom. You're going to have it on a really sunny windowsill. Mm-hmm. And that also kind of speaks to their evolution. So where they live is in nutrient-poor soils. Mm-hmm. And that makes sense because they're getting nutrients from the bugs that they eat.
Right.
And that allowed them to live in nutrient-poor soils so they don't have to compete with non-carnivorous plants. Right?
Right.
So in Florida, a good place to find them is in sunny locations. So underneath power lines or telephone poles where there's like frequent mowing.
Right.
Because mowing mimics naturally wild occurring fires, and fires burn down taller shrubs and trees, and carnivorous plants don't need that, but they benefit from it because they need that extra sun. So they're not going to be like in the deep pinelands or like a forest.
Yeah, they're not going to be in a in the tropics, in a tropical forest or any other kind of forest.
Yeah, so the Florida species are more in like an open bog or a grassland. So a lot of times people say like, oh, I have a Venus flytrap and I put it in full shade because it's from the tropics, it's from a bog, it's from a swamp, and they're from the Carolinas, and they are from a swampy bog situation, but that doesn't mean dark and gloomy. Right. That's an open wetland area, and because the soil's really soft, there can't be taller trees that anchor down. So they're out in the full sun.
Well, I think probably people in Florida want to know if there's one that eats cockroaches, because good Lord, that would be such a great thing to have. They're everywhere. And after a storm, like we just had Ian, I swear, it's like we get new ones that didn't exist before, right? They got spun around in that air and then they dropped down, right?
So we have, of the native species, we have pitcher plants called Sarracenia. They're native to mostly the Panhandle, and then we have one species that comes down to Orlando all the way across down to Tampa. And those need to be outside in full sun as well. But they can grow 6 inches to over 3 feet tall. And they have these long tubes, that's why they're called pitchers. And their mouths are always open. Their mouths can be 3 or 4 inches wide across. And then you could kill a cockroach and you could put it in there and you could feed your plants if you like.
I kill them as soon as I see them.
But then you probably just throw it out, and then this way you could be feeding a plant.
Well, maybe you brought me one today that I could take home that I could do that with. So why don't we talk about the plants that you brought today, because I know what you brought and they took pictures of it. So if you can talk about them, then they'll put them up on the screen and then you can talk about that plant.
Sure. So speaking of the pitcher plants, the one that I brought is a little different. It's called Sarracenia psittacina. And psittacina means parrot beak. So it has this little curved beak. So instead of an open mouth, it has a curved beak. And you can find them in the Panhandle. And you can also find them floating down rivers in just big mats of sphagnum moss. So they live in really wet conditions.
Yeah.
And these are one of 2 carnivorous plants that have this lobster pot trap. So their mouth is really tiny, and tiny little mosquito larvae and tadpoles swim in there, sometimes even tiny little fish, little microscopic organisms. But when they go in there and they make the turn, then they get
lost.
And at the very base of the pitcher is some digestive enzymes that they'll release. And even if they're floating in the water, if they're semi-immersed in the water, they can still release those enzymes and digest their prey. They also have some white veining on there, and scientists believe that when the sunlight comes through, the little organisms like, oh, this is an open window, an open door, I can leave. But then they bump into it, they get confused, and then they just keep going deeper and deeper into the picture.
Nature is a marvel. If you're just joining me now on Connecting with Kim, my guest in the chair today is Kenny Coogan. And Kenny is he actually grows carnivorous plants, and you sell carnivorous plants. He's written this book about carnivorous plants, and he brought some carnivorous plants today to the studio, and we photographed them. We're going to put them up. So, but he's just he has a master's degree in global sustainability. He's just a really fascinating person, knows a lot about nature and wildlife. So we've talked about this first plant. Let's talk about the other ones.
Another one that I brought, of course, is the most famous. It's the Venus flytrap, and in that pot, it's a community pot, so there's some sundews that are also native to Florida, and they're growing in there. And what's cool about them is in November through February, they die back. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid. It's just like a tulip or a bulb. They're perennials. They're supposed to live 10 to 20 years. They come back every year, but they die back in the winter. And right now, because it's the winter for Florida, even though it's beautiful outside, the sundews...
So take that.
Especially, I'm from Buffalo, so
yeah,
I really appreciate it.
And doubly take that because yesterday they got snow.
Yeah, I was actually just there a week ago, and it was like 70 degrees, so I'm glad I got out when I did.
Yeah, lucky you.
But these sundews, they have something called a hibernaculum. So, like hibernation. Mm-hmm. So they're usually long and sticky, but in the winter they die back and they have this little winter resting bud, which is what the hibernaculum is. So they're just protecting themselves from the cold, and you can see them being formed right now.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a sundew from Florida, but I also brought a sundew from South Africa. It's called the Cape sundew or Drosera capensis, and that, if you want to get a carnivorous plant, if you want to start growing one, that's the carnivorous plant to grow. Not the Venus flytrap, because the Venus flytrap also dies back in the winter, and you might be sad, and you might be confused, but it's normal.
I killed it!
Yeah. And that's what I think happens. I think
that's what
September, October, people start throwing them away.
They throw it away because they think they killed it, right?
Yeah, but it's going to come back.
But see, they don't have you to advise them. So there you go. So, but what's special about the one you're describing now?
It grows year round.
It goes year round.
35 degrees to 95 degrees. They get about this big. And not all carnivorous plants move when they catch their prey, but this one does. So if it gets a large housefly, it will kind of wrestle with it for about 45 minutes until it's in a perfect spot, and then it will start releasing these digestive enzymes.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, so I think, did we cover all four?
We definitely have at least one more.
Oh yeah, I thought so. I was counting them quick when I was looking in the thing.
The largest one that I brought is
Is that the one that went like this?
Yeah, it's really, each leaf is very large.
Yeah.
The scientific name is Gigantea. So there you go, it's very large. It's a Mexican butterwort. And butterworts are special because their entire surface of the leaf is sticky, and they eat fruit flies and fungus gnats, like that sundew from South Africa. Mm-hmm. So if people want to take care of, if you have a bad banana and you have those little sugar ants, or if you have a fruit fly, you can definitely be growing Mexican butterworts or those South African sundews indoors on a sunny window, and they will eat a lot of your pests.
Well, I consider that, especially those, those little tiny ants in Florida, they drive. We have a name for them in my family, which I cannot say on air, but they literally drive me crazy. And they move. Like you'll have them in one spot and try to get rid of them using natural products, and then boom, they're in another spot in your house, and you're thinking, what is going on? They're just, they drive me crazy. So one thing about Florida that just drives me crazy.
You could add a couple of carnivorous plants.
All right, there you go, and maybe that'll take care of my problem. But they're never coming in sunny areas, though. That's the problem. They want to come in your kitchen or your bathroom or someplace like that.
So the carnivorous plants that we've been talking about, they attract the bugs. They're called sundews because they glisten in the sun, and then bugs are attracted to it because they think it's a source of water. But when they interact with it, they find out quickly that it's actually an adhesive glue. So then they get stuck to it.
But it's not sweet, right? I mean, none of these plants are using anything like sweet.
Some of them do, but it's undetectable to humans, so you wouldn't notice, but a little fly or an ant would.
Okay.
And like you mentioned, I do have a carnivorous plant nursery. I'm 15 minutes north of the studio. But
and we're on Jackson Street in Tampa, just to remind people.
Yeah, but I'm not open to the public, but for about 6 months of the year, every weekend, from like August through November and February through May, I'm at a plant sale in Central Florida. So this past weekend I was in Mount Dora.
Oh, I love Mount Dora.
Yes, Mount Dora is a great sale.
It's a great town.
I couldn't believe how many, I mean, I've been there before for the plant sale, but I just can't believe how many people are shopping. You know, there's the cute boutiques, there's the stores, there's the garden fest, So,
well, they have a lot of festivals. I mean, not to get off on Mount Dora, but they have a lot of festivals, and there's a lot of groups that do day trips to Mount Dora. So that's one of the reasons why, especially now that we're starting into what we call in Florida the season.
Yes. So I was just there, but almost, you know, every other week, basically, I'm at a plant sale. You can find me from all the way up to Mount Dora, all the way down to Sarasota, East Coast, West Coast. And I'm usually the only vendor who has carnivorous plants. But when you go to a plant sale, you'll see the orchid people, you'll see the fruit tree people, you'll see the herb vendor, right, house plant people. So if you go to a plant festival, you'll probably see me selling carnivorous plants.
So when you go to a plant festival and you're selling carnivorous plants, I mean, you must get a lot of people that come up and they just want to, they don't know anything, so now they're going to talk to you about it, right? Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Or are they kind of scared?
They're not scared, but the biggest aspect of me going to a plant sale is education. Yeah. Because what people will do is they'll walk by and they'll say, oh, I already tried this $5 Venus flytrap from Aldi, or, you know, like, or some store, and it died. And they're like, I'm not going to try it again. And then they'll go next to me and they'll buy a $45 orchid, and they'll say, oh, I've killed this 4 times, but I'm going to try this one again. So I have to educate them that...
No, don't hate them.
No, I didn't say hate them. Educate them.
Yeah, you have to educate them. And now you have the perfect opportunity, because they said, I bought a Venus flytrap, and we now learned that, you know, they hibernate.
And it needs full sun.
Right, and it needs full sun, and they probably didn't have it in the right place. So now you have this wonderful opportunity to say, no, you should try it again, because now I'm going to help you understand how to raise that plant.
And I wrote a book.
And you wrote a book. And are you selling the book? Do you take the book to? Okay.
Of course, yeah. But if you don't want to buy the book, I do have a care sheet on my website. And then when you buy a plant, I also have a little postcard that also has every type of carnivorous plant I sell. It has a little growing guide. And people will come up to me. I've been doing it for about 5 years. People will come up to me and say, like, you know, they'll buy a plant and say, oh, do you need a care sheet? They go, oh, no. This is on our refrigerator from 5 years ago, and we're still, you know, referencing it.
Oh, that's fabulous. Now, we want you mentioned your website, so you need to be sure to mention the website to the folks out there, you know, that are listening and watching, so that they can go to your website.
It's very easy, KennyCoogan.com.
And I can tell you, folks, KennyCoogan.com, because I went to Kenny's website. And I never have anybody in the show that has a website that I don't go to. And I crawl all over that website. I do every drop-down menu. I look at every single thing that's on the website. I mean, that's just the kind of person I am, and kind of anal retentive like that. And I also like to know, before people come on my show, you know, what their website looks like and how easy it is to navigate and what kind of good information they have on there and all that. And I like to look at, if it's an organization, I look at, you know, who's their board of directors, who's their staff. I read their bios. I mean, I do a pretty thorough job. Your website's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's very easy to navigate, very, very interesting. You know, I mean, I found it great.
Thank you. I take care of it now, but the person who set it up is also in Tampa. She's a web designer. So she is a stickler for easy to navigate websites.
Well, what's the point of having a website people can't navigate, right? I mean, to me, that's kind of like you want to entice them in. You want to make it easy to access. You want to make it easy to see what's available so that they'll start reading.
Yes. I just remembered. I brought another plant.
Uh-oh. Well, let's not forget, because we are under 5 minutes now, so we want to be sure to talk about this plant.
This is my favorite plant.
Uh-oh.
It has fangs.
Fangs.
And I have an entire blog post on my website about it, because they're known to be difficult to grow.
Oh.
And the reason is because they are from a truly hot and humid environment. They need 65 to 95 degrees all the time. So you can grow them out in the summer, but come October, you have to bring them inside. And they're my favorite because they have fangs, and the fangs drip nectar. So it looks like the plant is drooling. And in the wild, ants come, and they actually live in the tendrils. And if another bug comes and starts munching on the plant, the ants will come out and viciously attack that ant, because the ants want to protect their home, which is The plant is called Nepenthes bicalcarata, which is the fanged pitcher plant.
The fanged pitcher plant. Oh my gosh. So we all know what we're going to do now in the group picture that we're going to take after the show's over. We're all going to simulate fangs. I'm just giving you guys a heads up.
And a couple of months ago was Halloween, and I saw somebody had a book bag that was the fanged pitcher plant, and I'm going to need to get one of those.
Oh my gosh, you are. And you're going to have to go scour the internet for that. Yeah. You know. So we're just about out of time. I want to give you, we don't have a lot of time, but I want to give you a chance. If you, I always give my guests a chance to look in their camera and say anything they want to our listening and watching audience. So now's your turn. Look in there and do your thing.
So if you want to learn more about carnivorous plants, you can go to carnivorousplants.org, and that's the International Carnivorous Plant Society, and I'm a board member for them. I serve as the education director, and the first Wednesday of every month, just kidding, the first Wednesday of May every year, it is World Carnivorous Plant Day.
Oh, yeah.
So May 3rd, 2023 is going to be the third annual World Carnivorous Plant Day, and on that day I post over 20 videos, one every hour on the hour, from growers and scientists and conservationists from all over the world about carnivorous plants, because we should be celebrating carnivorous plants. There's over 1,000 species, and they are disproportionately more endangered and more threatened than non-carnivorous plants. So we really need to protect them.
And I can imagine, because based on the places you told me that they need to grow, yes, they are under threat. There's no question about it. Well, Kenny, I can't thank you enough for being my guest on Connecting with Kim today. It's been really wonderful. My guest, in case you just are joining now, which means you will have to go back and watch the whole show, is Kenny Coogan, who has been talking with us about carnivorous plants and who has a book, and I'm going to prop it up one more time, Kenny's book on carnivorous plants. And you can also find him at plant shows in Florida, where you can talk to him about carnivorous plants. So thanks again, Kenny. That's all we have time for today on Connecting with Kim. It's always interesting, right? You can never say that I don't bring you interesting topics that are sometimes off the beaten path, because who would have thought carnivorous plants could be so interesting, and it is interesting. Thank you for joining us today on Connecting with Kim. Come back next week for another edition and another great show, helping you live your best life in our corner of paradise. And a shout out to my sponsor, the Spring of Tampa Bay. Thanks. Bye.